The easiest people to leave are the ones who believe you'll never have the courage to walk away. The morning Claire Bennett signed the divorce papers, the sky over downtown Boston looked almost unfairly beautiful. Sunlight spilled across the courthouse windows, turning the polished marble floors into sheets of gold. Outside, people hurried to work with coffee cups in their hands, laughing into phones, living ordinary lives that had nothing to do with the ending of hers. Inside courtroom 3, the only sound was the soft turning of paper. Ryan Bennett leaned back in his chair, his expensive watch catching the morning light. His tailored navy suit looked untouched by sleepless nights or difficult decisions. Across from him, Claire wore a simple cream sweater beneath a light gray coat she had owned for years. No jewelry except the thin silver wedding band she had forgotten to remove. Perhaps forgotten wasn't the right word. Perhaps she simply hadn't found the right moment to let go. Their attorney slid the final document across the table. Mrs. Bennett. Claire lowered her eyes to the last page. A single blank line waited beneath months of arguments, tears, counseling sessions, and promises that had slowly become accusations. She picked up the pen. Ryan watched her carefully. He expected trembling hands. He expected hesitation. Maybe even tears. Instead, Claire smiled. Not because she was happy. Not because losing 14 years of marriage felt easy. But because somewhere between being blamed for every disappointment and lying awake through endless nights wondering how to save someone who no longer wanted saving, she had discovered a quiet truth. Some endings arrive as rescue. The pen moved. Claire Bennett. The ink dried almost instantly. Just like that, 14 years became a signature. The judge nodded politely. I wish both of you the very best moving forward. Neither answered. Ryan signed his copy without looking up. His expression carried relief more than regret. When the clerk collected the documents, Claire finally reached toward her left hand. For a brief second, her thumb rested on the silver ring. Tiny scratches covered its surface. Years ago Ryan had laughed while sliding it onto her finger beneath white roses and soft violin music. Back then he had whispered, "Forever." Funny how forever could fit inside such a small lie. She slipped the ring off. No dramatic gesture. No tears. She simply placed it on top of the folder and stood. Outside the courtroom, two small faces immediately looked up. Emma, 10 years old, trying very hard to be brave. Beside her stood Noah, only 7, clutching the worn dinosaur backpack he insisted on carrying everywhere. Mom! Claire knelt until she was level with them. It's finished. Emma searched her mother's face, almost afraid to ask. Are you okay? Claire brushed a loose strand of hair behind her daughter's ear before smiling with the same calm expression she had worn inside. I think we're going to be okay. Not perfect. Not immediately. Just, okay. Noah reached for her hand first. Emma quietly took the other. Neither child looked back toward the courtroom doors. Children often understand silence better than adults. Behind them, Ryan finally stepped into the hallway. He hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. Claire stood 30 feet away, sunlight pouring through the courthouse entrance around her and the children. She looked smaller than he remembered, yet somehow stronger. His phone vibrated. A message flashed across the screen. Sophia. Lunch at 1? Can't wait to celebrate your freedom. Ryan smiled automatically. Freedom. That was the word everyone had been using. Friends congratulated him. Coworkers joked that his life was finally beginning. Even his parents had quietly admitted the divorce was probably for the best. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. Without thinking, he glanced toward Claire one last time. She was helping Noah zip his jacket. Emma laughed softly about something only children could find funny. Claire laughed too. A small laugh. Gentle. Unforced. Ryan frowned. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times. In every version, Claire cried. She begged. Or at least looked broken enough to prove she had loved him more than he loved her. Instead, she simply looked peaceful. The revolving courthouse doors turned once. Then again. Claire walked through them with Emma on one side and Noah on the other. She never looked back. Ryan watched until the 3 figures disappeared into the bright spring morning. He exhaled slowly, then turned in the opposite direction. Neither of them knew it yet. But that quiet walk away from the courthouse would become the single most important decision of their lives. Because while Ryan believed he had finally escaped the weight of his old life, Claire had unknowingly taken the first step toward the life they both once dreamed about. Only one of them would ever get to live it. And neither of them could imagine what was already beginning. Meanwhile, sometimes the loudest victory celebration is only the beginning of someone's quiet downfall. Ryan Bennett believed freedom should feel lighter. On the afternoon the divorce became official, he unlocked the door to the modern apartment he had rented weeks before leaving Claire. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston skyline. A bottle of champagne waited on the marble kitchen island beside two crystal glasses. Sophia was already there. She wrapped her arms around his neck before he could even set down his keys. "So," she laughed, lifting the bottle, "to your new life." Ryan smiled. "For our new life." The cork flew into the air. Champagne spilled over the rim of the glasses, sparkling under the afternoon sun. Sophia kissed him while music played softly through hidden speakers. Everything looked exactly like the future he had imagined. No responsibilities. No constant arguments. No children waking him before sunrise. No wife asking why he had come home late. For the first time in years he believed he had escaped. Across the city, Claire Bennett unlocked the door to apartment 2B. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and old wood. It wasn't much. 2 small bedrooms. A narrow kitchen with white cabinets that had begun turning yellow at the corners. A living room barely large enough for a second-hand couch. Emma walked in quietly, carrying one cardboard box that seemed almost too heavy for her thin arms. Noah followed, dragging his dinosaur backpack across the hardwood floor. Claire placed the final box near the window and looked around. The apartment echoed. Empty. Honest. No expensive furniture. No family photographs hanging on the walls. No memories waiting to hurt her. Only possibility. Emma forced a smile. "Is this home now?" Claire looked at her daughter for a long second. Then she nodded. "It is." No promises that everything would be perfect. No pretending children couldn't feel fear. Just truth. Emma walked toward the bedroom she would share with Noah. "There isn't enough room for both beds." Claire smiled gently. "Then we'll figure something out." That evening they spread 2 mattresses directly onto the floor. Noah declared it looked like a camping adventure. Emma rolled her eyes. Claire laughed. A real laugh. The first one in months. While the children argued over which side of the room belonged to whom, Claire quietly stepped into the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator. Milk. Eggs. Half a loaf of bread. Peanut butter. 3 apples. Enough. For now. She reached into her purse and unfolded a small notebook. Rent. Utilities. School lunches. Bus passes. Health insurance. Every number had already been calculated dozens of times. If she accepted the bookkeeping job during the day and cleaned offices 3 evenings each week, they could survive. Not comfortably, but survive. She closed the notebook before either child could see it. Noah appeared beside her. "I'm hungry." Claire smiled. "I know exactly what Chef Mom is making tonight." "What?" "World-famous peanut butter sandwiches." He giggled. "Again." "Only because they're exclusive." Emma overheard and laughed despite herself. For a few precious minutes the apartment felt warm. Not because of money, because no one was walking on eggshells anymore. Meanwhile, Ryan's social media exploded with congratulations. Photos from expensive restaurants, weekend trips, luxury hotels, comments filled with envy. "You look happier than ever. You definitely made the right decision. You deserve this." Ryan liked every single one. Late that night he scrolled through his phone one final time before going to sleep. Claire's profile picture had changed. No dramatic quote. No sad photograph. Only a picture of Emma and Noah standing beneath blooming cherry trees, smiling at something outside the frame. There was no caption. No complaint. No mention of divorce. Ryan stared at it for only a few seconds before locking his phone. He assumed she was pretending to be strong. Eventually reality would catch up with her. Eventually she would realize how impossible it was to raise 2 children alone. Eventually she would regret losing him. He fell asleep believing time was on his side. At 5:30 the next morning Claire's alarm rang. Darkness still covered the city. She dressed quietly, careful not to wake the children sleeping only a few feet away. Before leaving, she tucked blankets around Noah's shoulders. Emma stirred slightly. "Mom, I'm right here. Are you going to work?" Claire nodded. "I'll be back before school." Emma reached for her hand. "You don't have to be brave all the time." For a moment, Claire felt tears threaten the corners of her eyes. Instead, she kissed her daughter's forehead. "No," she whispered softly, "but I do have to keep going." Outside, the air carried the sharp chill of early spring. The streets were nearly empty. Claire walked toward the bus stop with a paper cup of coffee warming her hands. Behind her, the apartment lights remained dark. Ahead of her, the first rays of sunrise slowly painted the horizon. She didn't know where the road would lead. She only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Every step she took from this morning forward would belong to her. And somewhere beyond the ordinary rhythm of work, sacrifice, and silent determination, a door she could not yet see had already begun to open. Some opportunities never knock loudly. They simply walk into your life disguised as another ordinary Tuesday. 3 months passed. The calendar on Claire Bennett's refrigerator slowly filled with handwritten notes, school reminders, grocery lists, and work schedules scribbled in blue ink. Every day looked almost identical to the one before it. Wake up before sunrise. Prepare breakfast. Take Emma and Noah to school. Spend 8 hours balancing invoices for a small construction company. Pick up groceries on the way home. Read bedtime stories. Repeat. There was nothing glamorous about survival. Only rhythm. Only discipline. Only love disguised as routine. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Claire was sorting through stacks of receipts when her manager appeared beside her desk. "Claire." She looked up. "We've got a client with a problem." She closed the accounting software. "What kind of problem?" "They're opening a temporary office downtown. Nothing fancy. Just a workspace for about 20 employees. Their designer quit halfway through the project." Claire blinked. "I'm an accountant." "You studied interior design before you got married." The words landed softly, like someone opening a box she had locked years ago. She had almost forgotten. Before wedding plans. Before diapers. Before mortgage payments. Before becoming Ryan Bennett's dependable wife. She had dreamed of designing beautiful spaces where people wanted to stay. Her manager shrugged. "They don't have much money. Honestly, they're mostly looking for someone practical." Claire smiled politely. "I haven't designed anything in years." "Maybe." He slid a folder across her desk. "But I remember seeing your sketches once." After he walked away, Claire rested her fingertips on the folder without opening it. She wasn't afraid of failing. She was afraid of remembering the woman she used to be. That evening, after the children had fallen asleep, Claire cleared the tiny kitchen table. Colored pencils, a measuring tape, graph paper, an old notebook from college. Outside, rain tapped gently against the apartment windows. Inside, silence wrapped around the room. She opened the folder. The office wasn't impressive. Gray walls, cheap fluorescent lighting, an awkward floor plan. Most designers would have seen limitations. Claire saw possibilities. She began drawing. One desk moved closer to natural light. A forgotten corner became a reading space. Plants softened cold concrete. Simple wooden shelves replaced expensive decorative pieces. Nothing luxurious, just thoughtful. By midnight, the empty office had quietly transformed across the pages before her. She didn't notice she was smiling. For the first time in years, she wasn't calculating bills. She was creating. The following Friday, Claire carried the presentation herself. The office building occupied only 2 floors inside an aging brick warehouse that had recently been renovated. Nothing about it suggested wealth. No marble lobby. No polished executives. Just people moving quickly with laptops and coffee cups. A young project coordinator greeted her. "Miss Bennett. Claire is fine." He accepted the portfolio carefully. "The director is delayed. Would you mind waiting?" She nodded. From the conference room window, Claire watched employees helping one another assemble furniture. Nobody seemed interested in titles. One man wearing rolled-up sleeves quietly carried heavy boxes alongside the interns. When a receptionist accidentally dropped an entire stack of folders across the hallway, He knelt immediately to help gather every page. No one thanked him. No one seemed surprised. Claire noticed anyway, because kindness often revealed itself in moments no one believed were important. She returned her attention to the sketches before the man looked up. Their eyes never met. Down the hallway, Ethan Carter adjusted the cuff of his white shirt while listening to two senior managers argue over renovation costs. He had arrived without announcing himself. He preferred it that way. People behaved differently when they thought no one important was watching. As he passed the conference room, movement caught his attention. A woman stood alone beside a window reviewing hand-drawn layouts. No expensive presentation software. No dramatic sales pitch. Just pencil lines. Notes written neatly in the margins. She looked tired, but focused. There was something strangely peaceful about the way she studied every detail, as though she genuinely cared how strangers might feel inside a room they hadn't entered yet. Ethan didn't interrupt. He simply continued walking. 20 minutes later, Claire thanked the coordinator and headed toward the elevator. Whether they accepted her proposal no longer mattered. For one evening, she had remembered who she was before life demanded she become someone else. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight slipped through broken clouds, reflecting across wet sidewalks like scattered pieces of glass. Claire inhaled deeply before beginning the walk toward the subway station. Behind her, inside the quiet office building, Ethan Carter paused beside the forgotten portfolio still lying open on the conference table. Instead of looking first at the budget, he found himself studying the handwritten note in the corner of the final page. People don't remember beautiful rooms. They remember how those rooms made them feel. He read the sentence twice, then smiled almost imperceptibly. Without realizing it, Claire Bennett had just stepped into a story much larger than the project she believed she was pitching. And neither of them yet understood that this small meeting, without introductions, without handshakes, without even a conversation, would one day change far more than an empty office. Time rarely changes a life all at once. More often, it changes it one ordinary morning after another. The first winter came quietly. Snow settled across the windowsill of apartment 2B, while Claire Bennett stood in the kitchen stirring oatmeal before sunrise. Emma sat at the tiny table finishing a science project. Noah practiced spelling words aloud between spoonfuls of breakfast, proudly announcing every difficult one he managed to pronounce. Nothing about the apartment had become larger, but somehow it had begun to feel fuller. Not because they owned more, because laughter had slowly returned. Spring arrived with soft rain and cherry blossoms lining the sidewalks outside the elementary school. Claire no longer worked only as an accountant. The small office renovation she had completed months earlier had led to another recommendation, then another. People rarely complimented her designs first. Instead, they said things like, "It feels peaceful in here. My employees actually enjoy coming to work. I don't know what you changed, but this place feels alive." Claire always smiled. She never explained that rooms like people only needed someone willing to notice what had always been there. During the day she balanced invoices. At night she sketched layouts. After the children fell asleep, warm light from a single desk lamp spilled across graph paper covered in careful pencil lines. Dreams no longer felt impossible. They simply required patience. Summer followed. Emma turned 11. There wasn't enough money for a big birthday party, so Claire transformed the apartment balcony with paper lanterns bought from a discount store. Noah insisted on baking the cake himself. It leaned noticeably to one side. The frosting looked more enthusiastic than professional. Emma laughed until tears filled her eyes. "It looks terrible." "It tastes amazing," Noah protested. Claire watched them from the doorway. For one quiet moment, she realized neither child had mentioned their father all evening. Not out of anger. Life had simply continued. Sometimes healing arrived so gently that no one noticed it until the pain stopped introducing itself every day. Autumn painted Boston in shades of amber and gold. Claire's second-hand sedan finally refused to start outside a grocery store. She sighed, closed the hood, and laughed softly at her own bad luck. Instead of calling a tow truck immediately, she phoned Emma. "Looks like we're taking the bus tonight." Emma answered with unexpected excitement. "Can we stop for hot chocolate?" Claire smiled. "I think we can manage that." The bus arrived 20 minutes later. The three of them sat together near the back, paper cups warming cold hands as rain streaked across the windows. Outside, luxury cars rushed past without slowing. Inside, Noah rested his head against Claire's shoulder and quietly fell asleep. She looked out at the blurred city lights. Years earlier, she would have called this failure. Now, it felt strangely like freedom. No one expected perfection from her anymore. Only honesty, only love. 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. The apartment walls gradually filled with framed drawings Emma painted herself. Noah's piano recital certificates accumulated beside family photographs taken with inexpensive disposable cameras. Claire rented a tiny studio on weekends to meet design clients. The sign outside simply read, Bennett Interior Studio. There were no investors, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no headlines. Only one woman unlocking the front door each Saturday morning before anyone else arrived. She watered the plants, straightened the chairs, opened the curtains, and whispered the same sentence beneath her breath every single time. Thank you for another chance. Across the city, another office had quietly begun keeping track of her work. Not because she advertised aggressively, not because she chased wealthy clients, because every project she completed produced the same unusual result. Employees stayed longer. Customers smiled more. Businesses renewed their contracts. One afternoon, a neatly organized folder landed on Ethan Carter's desk. No special label, just a list of completed renovations. Attached beneath it sat several handwritten client letters. He read them slowly. None mentioned expensive materials. None praised fashionable trends. Again and again, different people described the same feeling. She listens. She notices details everyone else misses. Working with her feels human. Ethan leaned back in silence. Success could always be measured by numbers. Character usually revealed itself somewhere else. He closed the folder without making a single comment. But instead of placing it aside, he left it on the corner of his desk, where he could see it. On an ordinary Friday evening, Claire locked the studio after meeting her final client. The sun hung low above the city, covering brick buildings with soft golden light. Emma and Noah waited outside, sitting on the front steps with backpacks beside them. You took forever, Noah complained dramatically. Claire laughed. Were you too patient? Emma exchanged a playful glance with her brother. We practiced. Claire reached out, taking one small hand in each of hers. Together they walked toward home beneath trees already beginning to lose their leaves. None of them noticed the black sedan parked quietly across the street. Inside, a man glanced once toward the little studio with the simple sign before asking his driver to continue. There was still no introduction, no conversation, only another passing moment. Yet destiny, like architecture, was often built one careful foundation at a time. Sometimes, life doesn't punish people immediately. It simply removes the illusions they mistook for success. 5 years had passed since the morning Claire Bennett walked out of the courthouse holding Emma and Noah's hands. She no longer counted the years by anniversaries. She counted them by firsts. Emma's first honor roll certificate. Noah's first piano recital. The first client who insisted on paying more because Claire had given them more than they asked for. The first time she realized she had gone an entire week without thinking about Ryan. Healing had never arrived as a single miracle. It had arrived disguised as ordinary days. Ryan Bennett measured time differently. At first, everything seemed to reward his decision. His promotion came only months after the divorce. Sophia moved into the luxury apartment overlooking the harbor. Weekend trips became international vacations. Photographs filled social media. Sunsets in Santorini. Wine tastings in Napa Valley. Ski resorts in Aspen. Every smiling picture attracted the same comments. You two are perfect together. You've never looked happier. Ryan believed them. Sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we willingly tell ourselves. Then the market shifted. The company Ryan worked for announced a restructuring. First, no one worried. Executives promised stability. Meetings were filled with confident smiles and polished presentations. 3 months later, entire departments disappeared. Ryan survived the first round, not the second. The email arrived at 9:17 on a gray Monday morning. Position eliminated. 2 words. 20 years of loyalty reduced to corporate vocabulary. He carried a cardboard box through the lobby while younger employees quietly looked away. Outside, cold wind rushed between the buildings. For the first time in years, no one was waiting for him inside an office. Sophia tried to stay optimistic. For a while. You'll find something better. You always do. We've been through worse. But bills have a way of exposing conversations love cannot survive. Luxury apartments still demanded rent. Imported vacations still appeared on credit card statements. The sports car still required monthly payments. Slowly, dinners became arguments. Arguments became silence. One evening Ryan returned home carrying flowers. The apartment was empty. Sophia had taken her clothes, her photographs, even the coffee machine she insisted she had purchased. Only one envelope remained on the kitchen counter. I need someone who knows where he's going. No accusation. No goodbye. Just another door quietly closing. Ryan stood in the silent apartment long after darkness filled every room. The silence sounded strangely familiar. Only now, there was no one left to blame. Meanwhile, life continued unfolding inside Bennett Interior Studio. Claire hired her first full-time employee, a shy young designer fresh out of college. On her first day, the young woman apologized repeatedly after making several mistakes. Claire simply smiled. I'd rather teach confidence than replace fear. The employee never forgot those words. Neither did anyone else who worked there. Emma was preparing for high school. Noah practiced piano every evening before dinner. Their tiny apartment had long since been replaced by a modest brick house with a small maple tree in the front yard. Nothing extravagant. Just enough room for everyone to breathe. Some evenings, Claire sat on the porch with a cup of tea while the children laughed in the backyard. The sound reached places inside her heart she once believed had disappeared forever. One rainy afternoon, Ryan attended another job interview. The waiting room held 6 candidates. Most were younger, more experienced in new technology. The hiring manager glanced politely through Ryan's resume before offering the same practiced smile. We'll be in touch. He already knew what that meant. Walking back toward his car, rain soaked through his jacket. Across the street, he noticed a familiar logo displayed on the side of a newly renovated office building. Designed by Bennett Interior Studio. Ryan stopped walking. The name felt impossible. Surely, there had to be another Bennett. He stared for several seconds before traffic forced him forward. By the time he reached the opposite sidewalk, he had already convinced himself it couldn't be Claire. Not her. Not the woman who once depended on him. Not the woman he believed would eventually realize she couldn't survive alone. He drove away without looking back. That same afternoon, Claire stood inside the very building Ryan had just passed. Employees applauded as the company owner thanked her team for transforming the workspace. No cameras, no press, no grand speeches, only genuine appreciation. Claire accepted the handshake with her usual quiet smile. As everyone began leaving, she paused beside the wide glass windows overlooking the rain-covered streets below. People hurried through the storm carrying umbrellas, each one chasing a different destination. She had once believed happiness waited somewhere far ahead. Now she understood something different. Peace wasn't a place. It was the way you walked after deciding never to carry yesterday any farther than necessary. Far below, a dark sedan disappeared into afternoon traffic. She never noticed who was driving. Neither of them realized how close their lives had come to crossing once again. But destiny had remarkable patience. It never rushed the moment when 2 completely different journeys were finally ready to meet. The future rarely arrives with fireworks. Sometimes it comes as a single envelope waiting quietly in an ordinary mailbox. Monday morning began like every other. Claire Bennett watered the plants inside Bennett Interior Studio before unlocking the front door. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, casting long golden rectangles across the polished wooden floor she had insisted on restoring instead of replacing. She believed beautiful things deserved a second chance. Perhaps that was why her clients trusted her. Not because she could transform buildings. Because she never forgot that broken did not mean finished. She set fresh coffee on the small table in the reception area just as her assistant hurried inside, holding a cream-colored envelope. This came by courier. Claire accepted it with a grateful smile. There was no company logo she recognized. Only her name, handwritten in elegant black ink. She opened it slowly. Inside rested a thick invitation embossed in deep navy and silver. The National Leadership in Business Forum. We are honored to invite Claire Bennett, founder of Bennett Interior Studio, to participate as a featured speaker in this year's conference celebrating businesses that create lasting community impact. For a long moment she simply stared. Surely, there had been a mistake. She read the letter again. Then a third time. Her assistant smiled. Claire, they're inviting us. No, Claire whispered gently. They're inviting what we've built. She looked around the studio. The drafting tables. The shelves filled with material samples. The photographs of completed projects lining the walls. Nothing had happened overnight. Every inch of this place had been earned one patient day at a time. That evening, Emma found the invitation lying on the kitchen counter. She was 16 now. Confident. Kind. So, she smiled. Does this mean people think you're important? Claire laughed softly. I hope they think our work is useful. Emma shook her head. Mom, you always answer questions like that. Claire folded the invitation carefully. When people spend too much time trying to become important, they usually stop becoming helpful. Noah looked up from his piano practice. So you're going? Claire hesitated. I don't know. Emma crossed the room without another word. She wrapped both arms around her mother. You spent years telling us not to hide because we're afraid. I think it's your turn. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. Sometimes children quietly returned the courage their parents had spent years giving away. Across the city, another envelope arrived. Ryan Bennett unfolded the letter while sitting inside the cramped office of a struggling consulting firm that had hired him only 6 months earlier. Business had not been good. Several major clients had already withdrawn. Cash flow was shrinking. Investors were nervous. The invitation came from the exact same event. Attendance was mandatory. Their company had one final opportunity to meet potential financial partners capable of keeping the business alive. His manager spoke bluntly during the afternoon meeting. This conference may decide whether we're still here next year. No one laughed. No one checked their phones. Every face around the table understood exactly what those words meant. Several miles away, inside the headquarters of Carter Capital, preparations for the same event unfolded with quiet precision. Executives reviewed schedules. Security teams finalized guest lists. Media coordinators confirmed speakers. In the center conference room, Ethan Carter listened without interrupting. When the final agenda appeared on the large screen, one familiar name caught his attention. Claire Bennett. He said nothing. Instead, he reached for the folder that had remained on the corner of his desk for nearly 3 years. Inside were photographs of community centers, schools, small businesses, neighborhood cafes, each one transformed by the same designer. Not flashy, not extravagant, simply thoughtful. A senior executive noticed the folder. You followed her work for quite a while. Ethan closed it gently. Character leaves patterns. The executive waited. Ethan continued quietly. People who create trust usually create value. Nothing more needed to be said. The week passed quickly. Claire borrowed a simple navy dress from Emma's favorite boutique owner, who insisted she accept it as a gift. It belongs on someone who's earned it. Claire tried to protest. The owner refused. Back home, Noah polished her shoes himself until they reflected the afternoon light. Emma carefully pinned a small silver brooch to her jacket. You look exactly like yourself, Emma smiled. Claire looked into the hallway mirror. She did. No designer labels. No diamonds. No attempt to impress anyone. Just the woman who had survived enough to stop pretending to be anyone else. Elsewhere, Ryan adjusted the tie he had worn to countless successful meetings years before. Fit exactly the same. His life did not. As he looked at his reflection, he noticed the gray beginning to appear around his temples. The confident executive staring back at him had become a man carrying invisible disappointments. He picked up his briefcase and headed toward the conference that might save his career. Claire folded her invitation into her handbag and stepped out her front door at almost the exact same moment. Neither knew the other had received the same destination. Neither realized that 5 years after walking away from each other, their separate roads were finally leading toward the same room. And this time, neither of them would leave unchanged. The people who truly change your life rarely announce their arrival. Sometimes they are simply sitting in the same room, waiting for the moment your story catches up with theirs. The ballroom shimmered beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers. Soft piano music drifted through the grand hall while executives, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and investors greeted one another beneath warm golden light. Waiters moved gracefully between conversations, balancing silver trays filled with sparkling water and champagne. Everything about the evening spoke of success, yet Claire Bennett felt strangely calm. She adjusted the sleeve of her navy dress before stepping through the entrance. It wasn't the most expensive gown in the room. It wasn't designed to attract attention. It simply fit, like the woman wearing it. Emma had hugged her before she left. Noah had reminded her to smile. "You already won, Mom," he had said. "Tonight is just everyone else finding out." Those words stayed with her as she accepted her name badge. Claire Bennett found her Bennett Interior Studio nothing more, nothing less. Across the ballroom, Ryan Bennett straightened his tie for what felt like the 10th time. His company had reserved one of the smallest tables near the back of the hall. Their CEO whispered instructions before the program began. "Network with everyone. Smile. We need investors." Ryan nodded automatically. 5 years earlier he had attended events like this with confidence. Tonight he attended with hope. There was a difference. Confidence assumed tomorrow belonged to you. Hope merely asked for another chance. The lights dimmed slightly as guests found their seats. A large screen illuminated the stage. National Leadership and Business Forum. Applause filled the room. Claire quietly slipped into her assigned seat near the front. Ryan remained several rows behind. Neither noticed the other. Not yet. The host welcomed the audience before introducing the evening's first panel. Stories of businesses creating lasting community impact. The moderator smiled toward the wings. Our next speaker transformed more than commercial spaces. She transformed neighborhoods. Please welcome. A brief pause. Claire Bennett. Ryan's hands froze. The applause around him became strangely distant. No, it couldn't be. The woman walking confidently toward the stage moved with quiet grace. No dramatic entrance. No bodyguards. No designer entourage. Just measured footsteps. When she reached the podium, the spotlight settled gently across her face. Ryan stared without blinking. She looked different. Not younger. Not wealthier. Simply peaceful. The kind of peace money could never imitate. Claire smiled warmly at the audience. 5 years ago, she began softly, someone asked me what success looked like. The ballroom became silent. I didn't know the answer then. She paused. Today, I think success is creating places where people feel safe enough to become themselves. No motivational slogans. No rehearsed performance. Just honesty. She spoke about restoring old libraries instead of demolishing them. About designing schools where anxious children could breathe more easily. About neighborhood cafes that became gathering places because every chair had been placed with intention. She never mentioned sacrifice. She never mentioned divorce. She never mentioned the nights she had cried after her children had fallen asleep. Those chapters belonged to her, not to the audience. When she finished, the applause rose slowly, then continued growing. People stood. One row, then another, until nearly the entire ballroom was on its feet. Ryan remained seated, not because he refused to clap, because he couldn't. The woman standing beneath those lights no longer resembled the version of Claire he had stored inside his memory. That woman had depended on him. This one depended on no one. As the applause settled, the moderator smiled. Claire, before we continue, we've received a question from one of tonight's advisory partners. Several guests instinctively turned toward the reserved front tables. There, surrounded by senior executives, sat Ethan Carter. For the first time all evening, he slowly rose to his feet. The room quieted immediately. He wasn't merely respected. He was the kind of man whose silence carried more weight than most people's speeches. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Even he recognized the name. Carter Capital, one of the most influential investment firms in the country, the very company his struggling employer hoped to approach before the conference ended. Ethan looked toward the stage, then toward Claire. His expression remained calm, almost thoughtful. "I don't have a question." The audience waited. "I simply wanted to thank you." Claire looked surprised. Ethan continued. "Buildings eventually age. Furniture wears out. But when someone designs a place that helps people trust each other, the value lasts much longer than architecture." The ballroom fell completely silent. Claire lowered her eyes for a brief moment before answering with a small smile. "Thank you." Nothing more. No familiarity. No explanation. Yet something invisible shifted inside the room. Ryan noticed it immediately. People weren't watching Claire the way they watched an invited speaker anymore. They were watching her as someone Ethan Carter himself had chosen to acknowledge. And in rooms like this, that changed everything. Ryan's heartbeat quickened as dozens of conversations quietly began around him. How does Carter know her? Have they worked together? Is there a partnership? No answers came. Only curiosity. Far above them, crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across the ballroom floor. 5 years earlier, Ryan had watched Claire walk away from a courthouse believing her story had ended. Tonight, sitting only a few rows behind her, he realized something far more unsettling. Her story had only just reached the chapter he had never imagined he would witness. And before the night was over, the truth behind Ethan Carter's quiet respect would leave the entire ballroom speechless. The truth never needs to raise its voice. It only waits for the perfect moment to be recognized. The applause had barely faded when the moderator returned to the center of the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said with a smile, "before we conclude this evening, we have one final announcement." Guests settled back into their seats. The lights softened. A new image appeared across the massive screen. A single sentence. "Building better communities together." The moderator continued. "For the past 3 years, Carter Capital has quietly partnered with organizations dedicated to transforming schools, small businesses, and public spaces across the country." Ryan listened with only half his attention. His company's future depended on securing a meeting with Carter Capital before the conference ended. Nothing else mattered, until he heard the next sentence. "Tonight, we are officially introducing the person who has helped shape this initiative from the very beginning." A quiet murmur spread across the ballroom. Ryan instinctively looked toward Ethan Carter. Instead of walking to the podium, Ethan remained seated. His eyes were fixed on only one person, Claire. The host smiled warmly. "Claire Bennett, would you please join Mr. Carter on stage?" For a brief second, Claire looked almost surprised. Not frightened, simply humbled. She stood slowly. The audience applauded as she crossed the stage once more. Ryan stared in disbelief. He had assumed Ethan admired her work. He had never imagined she belonged beside him. Ethan walked forward at the same calm pace that had always defined him. There was no dramatic music, no theatrical reveal. When he reached Claire, he extended his hand. She accepted it naturally, not like strangers, not like celebrities performing for cameras, like two professionals who had spent years earning each other's trust. The gesture lasted only a moment, yet it somehow answered every whispered question in the room. Ethan faced the audience. 5 years ago, he began. Our firm started searching for architects, designers, educators, and entrepreneurs capable of creating something more valuable than profit. He paused. We were looking for people who improved lives. Another quiet pause. I found one. He turned toward Claire. Actually, I believe she found us. Soft laughter moved through the ballroom. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. None of this made sense. Ethan continued. Most people assume leadership begins with influence. Claire looked at him, listening quietly. I disagree. I believe leadership begins with service. He gestured gently toward her. For the last 3 years, Claire Bennett has served as an independent strategic advisor on every community redevelopment initiative funded by Carter Capital. The screen behind them changed. Photographs appeared one after another. Neighborhood libraries. Children reading inside colorful classrooms. Family-owned cafes filled with customers. community health centers, small businesses reopening after renovation. Every project carried the same discreet credit. Community design advisor Claire Bennett gasps echoed across the ballroom. Ryan felt the room tilt beneath him. 3 years. While he had been struggling to rebuild his career, Claire had quietly been helping shape projects across the country, without publicity, without interviews, without ever announcing it. The moderator smiled. There is one more announcement. Ryan barely breathed. Ethan accepted a slim folder from an assistant before speaking again. Beginning next month, Carter Capital will launch the Carter Community Initiative as a permanent national foundation. He opened the folder. I'm honored to introduce the person who will lead its design and community strategy. He turned toward Claire. Our founding partner. Claire Bennett. The ballroom erupted. People rose to their feet. Applause thundered beneath the crystal chandeliers. Claire closed her eyes briefly before taking a slow breath. Not because she had expected this, because she understood exactly what it represented. Not success. Responsibility. She accepted the folder with both hands. Thank you, she said softly. I promise we'll remember that every building we create will eventually become part of someone's memories. The audience applauded even louder. Ryan could barely hear them. Only one sentence repeated inside his mind. Founding partner. Not employee. Not consultant. Partner. His own company had spent months trying to schedule a preliminary meeting with Carter Capital. Every proposal, every financial projection, every desperate presentation, all of them had been waiting for approval from the leadership team. And Claire, the woman he once believed would never succeed without him, was now sitting at that table. Not because she had married wealth, not because someone had rescued her, because she had quietly become someone worthy of leading it. As the ceremony ended, guests surrounded the stage hoping to congratulate Claire. Business leaders waited patiently for introductions. Journalists requested interviews. Investors exchanged business cards. Ryan remained frozen near the back of the ballroom. 5 years earlier, he had watched Claire leave a courthouse carrying 2 children and 1 small suitcase. He had mistaken that morning for the end of her story. Tonight he finally understood the truth. She had not walked away from him toward uncertainty. She had walked toward the life he had never possessed the patience, humility, or courage to build. And as Claire disappeared into a crowd that now welcomed her with genuine respect, Ryan realized the greatest loss of his life had never been his career. It had been failing to recognize the extraordinary woman standing quietly beside him long before anyone else ever did. The greatest revenge is never watching someone lose. It is discovering that you no longer need them to win. The ballroom slowly emptied. Conversations drifted toward the exits as guests exchanged business cards, warm handshakes, and promises to meet again. Crystal chandeliers still glowed overhead, but the excitement of the evening had softened into quiet conversations. Claire Bennett stepped onto the terrace overlooking the Boston skyline. Night had wrapped the city in thousands of lights. A cool breeze carried the scent of rain that had not yet fallen. For the first time all evening, she allowed herself a slow breath. Not because she felt victorious, but as she finally felt still. The glass door behind her opened gently. Footsteps approached. She already knew who it was before she turned. Ryan. He stopped several feet away. The distance between them was small. The years between them were not. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable, only honest. Ryan looked older than she remembered. Not simply because of the gray beginning to spread through his hair. Life had changed the way he carried himself. The confidence that once filled every room had been replaced by something quieter. Humility, perhaps. Or regret. I almost didn't come over, he admitted. Claire smiled politely. But you did. He nodded. I owed you that. She waited. He looked toward the city lights before speaking again. I spent years believing I had made the right decision. His voice remained steady. I kept telling myself that eventually you'd realize you couldn't make it without me. A faint laugh escaped him. I couldn't have been more wrong. Claire said nothing. There was nothing left to defend. Nothing left to explain. Ryan lowered his eyes. I never saw what you were becoming. You were always building something. I just I thought it was supposed to be me. Claire looked at him with quiet kindness. No, it was always supposed to be me. The words were not spoken with pride. Only truth. Ryan slowly nodded. For the first time he understood. He had mistaken dependence for love. He had mistaken comfort for loyalty. He had mistaken Claire's quiet strength for weakness simply because it never demanded attention. I hurt you, he whispered. Claire answered gently. Yes. Another silence settled between them. But pain isn't where my life stayed. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. I wish I could change it. So did I. She smiled again. For a very long time. The breeze lifted a loose strand of her hair. She tucked it behind her ear exactly as she had done countless times before. Only now there was no sadness attached to the gesture. Ryan looked at her one last time. You've built an incredible life. Claire followed his gaze toward the city. It wasn't built in one day. It was built every morning I chose not to give up. The terrace door opened once more. Emma stepped outside first. Now nearly a young woman, she walked with the same quiet confidence her mother carried. Mom! Claire turned immediately. Emma smiled. They're looking for you. A second later Noah appeared beside his sister, now taller than Claire's shoulder. You promised we'd celebrate with pancakes. Claire laughed. I did promise. Noah grinned. I've been reminding everyone. Ryan watched the children. They no longer looked like frightened little faces waiting outside a courthouse. They looked secure. Loved. At peace. Emma noticed Ryan and offered a polite smile. Good evening. No bitterness. No resentment. Only simple courtesy. Claire had raised them well. Ryan suddenly realized that was another life he had missed. Not because anyone had taken it from him. Because of the choices he had made. Another figure stepped onto the terrace. Ethan Carter. He approached without urgency. Without interruption. He glanced briefly toward Ryan before looking at Claire. The car's ready whenever you are. Claire nodded. Thank you. There was no dramatic embrace. No attempt to prove anything. Only mutual respect that had been earned over years of shared work and quiet trust. Ryan noticed it immediately. The strongest relationships often required the fewest words. Claire looked back at Ryan one final time. I hope your company finds the help it needs. He blinked. You'd still hope that? She smiled. Wanting peace for someone else doesn't cost me mine. Ryan lowered his head. There was nothing left to say. Claire reached for Emma's hand. Noah walked beside her, talking excitedly about pancakes and piano practice. Ethan followed a few steps behind. Not leading. Not claiming. Simply walking alongside them. Together they disappeared through the softly lit hallway. Ryan remained alone beneath the night sky. Far below, the city continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But he knew better. His mind returned to one unforgettable morning. The morning Claire had smiled, taken their children by the hand, and walked away from the courthouse without looking back. For years he believed that was the day he won. Standing there now, he finally understood the truth. That morning had never marked the end of her story. It had marked the beginning of the life she was always meant to live. And the greatest lesson she had ever given him required no revenge, no accusation, and no final argument. Only one quiet truth. She never won him back. She won herself.